Property on Route 292. The tax map number is 6856-05-194793. The property size is .13 acre. It's located between Route 292 and Mountain View. We have had, Mike, I don't know if you know all the history behind this, this last variance application was the second application for this property.
Okay.
So we have had, what do we think, about six or seven site visits on this property. I did a little bit of homework and that the property was owned by, as far as back as I could go easily, was 2007, was owned by the house to the left, which was 1443 Route 292. They lost it in 2014 to taxes. 2015, the property to the right purchased it. And then in 2022, they lost it to taxes. In 2022, Mr. Claudio purchased it for $1,100 and paid the $1,000 taxes. And then Mr. Zavala purchased the property in 2023 for $11,000. In November of 2023, Zavala applied for a variance for a building, I believe it was 1,600 square feet. In November, the site was not staked out for the first visit. December, again, the site was not staked out. Finally, in January, it was staked out, and the variance was denied. It was reapplied for in November of 2024, having made the house a little smaller. In 2025, while having a conversation with Mike, he realized that there was some other codes that hadn't been looked at, I guess. And so that's kind of where we...
Is there still an application pending?
Yes, we have not...
They wrote a letter to withdraw.
Okay.
And the ZBA did not grant that withdrawal.
Okay, so...
We want...
We did do an formal motion of extension to adjourn it to meet with you.
Okay, all right, understood.
We understand that there's the one code, the corner lot, that you feel this applies to, but there was another code that kind of contradicts that.
Yeah, and I think the appropriate course of action is to notify them that code section exists, because I wasn't aware of that code section, and in my discussions with Everett, he wasn't either. And so when we had gone through the code and said, this is a really interesting situation because it qualifies as a corner lot, and even our last conversation together, my suggestion was we go back to the town board and fix it.
Yeah.
To say, we have to, this is an issue because this is, obviously that's not what is intended by the code. To have a situation where you have three sides, but without that section that says there has to be a front yard or a rear yard, then without having it, we end up in an unintentional and very awkward situation where we'd have to defer to the landowner because that's what the code says. And the law that's applied to zoning codes when you challenge them is that they're interpreted against the drafter, and all ambiguities are to be resolved in favor of the landowner.
Interpreted in favor of the drafter.
No. They're construed against the drafter.
But who's the drafter?
The town.
Okay. Got it.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to...
No, it's okay. It's fine.
Thank
No, it's totally okay. And John, I didn't see that provision. And when Everett and I were talking about this, in preparation of his determination on what is required, it was a bit of a head scratcher because we knew there were past front and rear yard variances applied for around the lake, but we didn't see the provision that said you need to have that.
How
Can I ask, I'm sorry, Mario, can I ask a question before? So this is a corner lot, and I agree with you that, I mean, I looked at this a lot, just because I've got nothing else to do, and you know, I mean, there are a slew of definitions of corner lots in the law. I mean, I think clearly this is not a corner lot as any normal person would understand it.
Yeah.
But as you say, the code says what it says. But in this particular situation, it seems to me that he's worse off if it's a corner lot than if it were just a regular lot, because he's got to have
Right.
two fronts and a rear, so he's even worse off. So now that he says this is a corner lot, do we have to treat it as a corner lot? If he comes back and says, well, it's really not a corner lot and I only need to,
No, you know, look, I think.
listen, I don't want to break the guy's chops, but, you know, I don't think it should be treated as a corner lot, and
Well, it
it is, but that's what I'm saying. If the
Yeah,
code says
on-
it is a corner lot, do we have to treat it as a corner lot?
But I thought he's-
And then we say, well, you have to have two front yards and a rear yard.
No. So what should happen is, we'll rescind a portion of Everett's letter
All
to
right, so
say.
you agree with that second
But you
portion?
rescind the portion of Everett's letter that says it is a corner lot. Is that what you mean?
Yeah,
That
yeah,
portion.
so,
I think that's I agree with you. I think that's
Yeah.
the appropriate action.
yeah,
And
and,
that's my
and-
question, or are we stuck with that interpretation because that's what the code says?
well, if that other provision didn't apply, then we would.
Yeah.
But, you know, one thing I would recommend outside of this, and it doesn't have to come from you guys, it'll just come from me to the town board to say, hey, look, when you're drafting and this has been, just so you guys know, this has been a constant conversation that nothing has happened, you know, throughout the years to say, hey, look, we need some revisions to this code, okay? There are uses that don't have definitions that are being applied, you know, that are causing issues for, you know, landowners are taking advantage of them when that's not what was intended by the code. But when you don't have a definition next to a use, you know, and look, if you're looking at the definition of corner lot, you know, there should be a notification to say, please also see section, you know, the other section of the code that says you have to have a front and a rear, because that section was added after the definition of corner lot was added, but then there was no tie back between the two sections. So it you know, for instance, I sit with the town board in Wappinger, right? And we've gone through a number of code revisions. And one of the things that we've been really careful about in the code revisions is to make sure that there is a link between, let's say you want to, a lot of codes will say, okay, you know, they'll have a section before you get to in the zoning code that deal with particular uses, right? And let's say the use table doesn't reference the use, but it's in the code section, right? So, you know, what do we all do, right? The normal person goes to the use section of the code, the table, and looks at the table. They don't necessarily go into the body of the law to understand that there's some other restrictions there. So now, you know, we've gone through and said, all right, we have to tie this to this, tie that to that, and make sure everything is linked together.
How do we do that? Is that just the town board that does that?
Yeah, that's the town, you know, so going forward, look, I don't think we're going to have any confusion about corner lots because we're all going to know to look in two different places.
Now, if you.
But it would be appropriate for corner lot to say, see also,
Wait, isn't that an easy fix? though?
yeah, it's a very easy fix.
Yeah, but I think it
Just-
also would make more sense too, and one of the things I wanted to do was to go back but I mean, most, as I looked at it, and obviously you know more than I do, but most of the town codes say, you know, it's either at an intersection or two perpendicular streets or whatever.
Yeah.
That's a corner.
Yeah.
You know,
Right.
it defines a corner
Right.
lot in the code.
Right.
You know, as I say, I forget what the precise language is, but
Yeah.
adjacent, I think it's adjacent streets or something, that's what whatever.
Yeah.
Intersecting streets.
Right,
And I
right.
think it would make more sense
To have
to have that in the code.
more
because
defined
this,
corner
you
lot.
know, so that you don't have situations where.
Yeah, where you're saying, hey, this is illogical. The interpretation
Yeah, this is
requires
not-
it, but
this is
it.
not a corner lot.
Right, it's not. right,
So we
exactly.
do-
But in
We're
this
sa-
case, though, you've got the language that John found. It may just be as simple as saying, refer to, go look at this.
Yeah, the edit, I mean, you know, if
I'm
if
sorry,
if I'm
Margot,
gonna
you want-
replace the definition of corner lot, I'm gonna make sure that it says exactly what it's supposed to say. It's not gonna it's not gonna capture things that are not intended to capture.
So if you rescind that part of the letter, what happens to the application? What is it then considered? Does it come back to us?
Well, then a variance would be required and it would come back. You'd have to come back.
Okay.
Yeah.
But we
Now-
never withdrew the application, so we just continue
With an
the,
updated letter?
right.
Yeah, I mean, if
If we didn't withdraw the application, it's still valid.
yeah, look, here's what I would do. So I would want to give the benefit to the landowner to say, hey, look, we're rescinding this determination that we previously made. A variance is required. We're not going to require a new full application to the board, but we're going to have to notice the variance, you know, because we should have known about that section, and he should have been taking advantage of this time to process his application. So I would do that. And the only thing I will say about withdrawals of applications, you don't have authority over withdrawal or not withdrawal. Someone withdraws their application, it's withdrawn. You don't have to accept it. It just is what it is.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
I thought it had to have a formal motion.
No. I mean, someone withdraws it, then it's withdrawn. You know,
But to err on the side of the resident, then we should say, listen, we didn't fully withdraw it, so if you want to move forward, we
yeah,
can.
yeah.
Okay.
We're not going to ask you for a new application. You know, we have the denial letter, but we are going to have to do notices again. And I'm not sure if we do them or they do them, but
Do them,
okay. So we'd have to do a new notice.
put them back on an agenda.
Yeah.
We have to contact Mr. Schilling.
Yeah, I'll do that. I'll call Bill.
Okay.
Yeah, I was.
Now, in my research, and I reached out to Patterson, and I've called the association, the Planning Federation for New York, I called Association Towns, I did some deep diving and interesting information. Especially Putnam Lake, which is a similar subdivision to Shore Haven, where it was divvied up in the 30s, you know, somewhere between the 30s and the 50s kind of thing. And the parcels are so small, where if there was a vacant lot and the neighbor owned it, then it becomes one, you get a lot line adjustment. Because what happened with this?
Or a merger.
Something to that.
Yeah.
Because of the water district, which went in Shore Haven, and that's why we ended up in this situation where the taxes originally in '07 were $75. They went up by 2022, they're well over $1,000. And so that's why the people who owned the property just let it go for taxes because they didn't feel that it was worth their money.
Yeah.
So how do we avoid letting small parcels like this get developed? I know, is that something else we can look into putting in the code?
Well, they're upzoned, right? That's why people come for variances. That's the cure, is to upzone them.
But I thought there was another piece, and I can look into the letter that you had written, was because it was subdivided.
Oh, yeah, this one, so let me just go back to my letter, because this one is actually really interesting. And at this point, it's just for information purposes. I mean, it's not,
You know, just like I said, this is quite a learning experience.
yeah, so this is so this section of code, so I don't know if you have my letter, or I'm sorry, it's actually Bill's, Everett's letter.
Yes.
Okay, hold on, it's in the back of what
Yeah, I have
Joanne
Everett's
gave us.
letter.
Yeah, we do have it, I think.
So there are, this is a unique situation in the sense that the zoning code recognizes the right to develop non-conforming lots under certain conditions. Were the lots created by filed map? How did they come into existence is what's examined. And in this case, it says, new buildings on lots, so this is 215.9, which refers to lots. And then section G of the code, it says, new buildings on lots less than the minimum area. A permit may be issued for the erection of a building on a lot or parcel for which a valid conveyance has been recorded or contract of sale has been signed, and the conveyance recorded prior to the adoption of this chapter, notwithstanding that the area of such lot or parcel is less than that is required for the district in which such parcel or lot lies. And then it says, regarding lot frontage pursuant to 215.13, pre-existing lots are subject to the road frontage requirements as of the time the pre-existing lot was created. So what we did was, we had to go back and analyze how this lot was created. So the requirement for lots to be created by filed subdivision map came about in, I think it was the 60s, but we may not have even have had a planning board in the 60s. I don't remember.
We didn't have a zoning code till 78.
Okay, so then,
No, actually, 1941.
yeah, right, I thought we had a zoning
We
code.
had a zoning code in 1941, and we
But
have
what
subdivision
happened in
maps.
78 then? Because I thought,
Probably update.
It says zoning code which the town adopted May 9th of 1978. It's right, the next,
Update.
well, I know, it's just the next line right here.
okay, I didn't realize, so 1940s, we can say. All right,
We
so-
actually learned that after we prepared that memo, because we didn't learn that until
We gotta do homework.
the Tremson,
Right,
till Tremson.
yeah, I went back
So
and
can
found
we
all the
see,
old
I'd
code
love to
books.
see that version of the zoning code from the 1940s.
It's like this big.
Wow.
It's a big book.
Is it in
Yeah.
your office?
Yeah.
Oh,
I
I'm
got
gonna come
everyone
see it.
now in my office.
So how that applies here is that what our zoning code is interested in was, how were these parcels created? Were they created by deed, or were they created by the recording of a map? And so if our planning board didn't come into existence until the 70s, then many lots were created by deed. And that's where a landowner, they own a parcel of land, and then they would have a surveyor go subdivide a parcel, and as long as it met the minimum acreage requirement, then they could convey that out. And the process at the county clerk's office was to look at the zoning code and look at the minimum acreage and say, well, as long as the minimum acreage is stated by the surveyor in the last line of the description, being 1.12 acres in a 1 acre zone, then it was accepted for recording. But our code looks at how things were created, and if you were created by map, then you could take advantage of the pre-existing nonconformity. And so you see a section of the zoning code that'll say, that you can develop a pre-existing nonconforming lot as long as you can, your structure can meet the bulk setback requirements that are currently in effect. And if you don't meet the bulk, then you have to get a variance. But the merger requirement, I haven't looked at the merger question in a long time, but oftentimes you'll have a zoning code that says all lots in contiguous ownership.
I thought it was interesting.
Yeah,
and
yeah,
I think
so-
it would have alleviated this debacle we got into, where
Yeah,
this
when you have a-
peanut-sized parcel, they're,
Yeah, and oftentimes merger happens by definition and not by a separate section of the code that says merger, right? In North Salem, it's in the definition of the word lot. It'll be, all lands in contiguous ownership, not otherwise shown on a filed map and, complying with zoning. So,
so interesting how, essentially all the towns are doing similar things, but everybody's, zoning codes are so different.
yeah, well, we learned, most people in the first year of law school, you have your property class, or sometimes it's the second year of law school, and you have a case called, I think it's Village of Euclid versus Ambler Realty, and that was a case where a zoning code was, I forget exactly the details, but so I'm going back to like 1999 here, but there was like exclusionary zoning, and I forget if it was upheld or denied, but in effect, it legitimatized this form of zoning, which was by laying out blocks and lots and, having sections of 1 acre and 2 acre and 3 acre. But I think New York City was the first place in New York to have a zoning code. And it laid out and that's why everything is so organized, this, by block in Manhattan, is because of this, Euclidean type zoning. But the New York, like the state of New York, promulgated these draft, these model zoning codes, and a lot of towns adopted them, but then never tailored them to the like nuances of their own town.
Yeah.
And in effect, we've all started with like the same model code, and then have modified them as situations have come up.
Yeah, no, but I know there've been a lot of talk about updating, doing a whole
So
master plan
you
overhaul.
said you were trying to discover if it was recorded by map or by deed.
It was, yeah. This property is
So
on.
which? It was
It
recorded
was-
by map?
Yeah, it was created as a result of maps filed in the early 1900s for Whaley Lake. So it was laid out by map. And Margot, similar to Putt Lake, and I don't know if there was. Putt Lake was very interesting because the maps that were laid out for Putt Lake were literally a grid laid over the land without regard for any natural features whatsoever.
Oh, my God.
It's, well, we have all the paper roads where
Yes.
they show on maps all these roads that aren't there.
And they were laid out actually for campground sites.
Yeah, because
Every block, let's say it was 25 by 50, was a campground. But you know where Bear Hill Road is?
oh yeah, that was an interesting one.
Yeah, Bear Hill was laid out in that grid fashion, and I had
There was something funky about the way that, because we didn't adopt that road, we like acquired it. There
yes,
some,
that was my fault.
It happens.
Well,
But I just remember that,
It became a highway by use,
Yes.
and then so the town started to maintain it, even though it wasn't a town road. And after 10 years, it became a highway by use. And by virtue of it becoming a highway, it segregated the parcels, and the town was forced to accept my client's subdivision map.
Oh,
And
wow.
and that was my first real interaction with Rich Williams.
Oh, God
And,
bless you.
And it's where we became friends.
Yeah.
But
That's fun.
I had to lay it all out for him, and that was a kind of an interesting thing. But again, this was a piece of property that someone filed a map before there was a planning board in the county clerk's office over their property without regard for where anything could be constructed, and then sold off parcels on that map. And that's why property owners in Putt Lake own 5 or 6 parcels in a row on the maps that are existing for Putt Lake, which we wouldn't do today. Our process is completely different.
Or the roads
They
change.
wouldn't ask them to merge them at this point?
Well, they're merged, but they're still valid for purposes. They're merged for zoning purposes,
Okay.
but they are still valid for map purposes. So would I go buy one of those? If I own 5, would I sell off one? No. But the unsuspecting buyer, and Margot, this happens often in Putt Lake.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Someone doesn't pay taxes on one of the parcels if they haven't already been merged into one tax lot, and then the mortgage isn't recorded against all of it. This is the most recent one we had a couple of years ago. There was a mortgage foreclosure. The bank foreclosed on half of a tax parcel, and then someone bought half of a tax parcel at a foreclosure sale. We're like, all right,
Buyer beware then?
caveat emptor.
And that wouldn't come up in a title search?
Well, you know what happens at a foreclosure sale? You show up at
Oh,
the
right,
courthouse
that's
with the
right.
check,
Exactly.
You know,
And you own it.
and you own it. Or you go buy it, people go to tax sales, they go buy tax liens, and they make the interest until such time as they get redeemed. And then they get redeemed, and that's how they make money. you know, and every so often you end up owning one of these things and you're like, now what? Because they go to tax sales for a reason,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
Every
Well,
dam,
that's like this parcel, you know, it had never been developed, and you kind of wonder, like, why, you
Yeah.
know, like, so.
yeah, same for, you know, like, here's a very common occurrence. There's a lot of properties that have ponds and small dams,
Yeah.
and then the owners realize that they have to maintain the dam. And if it's on a separate tax parcel, they try to let it go for taxes, and the county finally wised up and actually went out and started to do inspections because they started to acquire property in tax sales that were detrimental to.
Wow.
Yeah, there's a whole game here. I mean, we could go on for hours about that.
Yeah. So right now, what will happen is you will revise that letter, you'll let
Yeah, so we'll-
Mr. Schilling
we'll-
know,
Yeah.
and then they can come back to Joanne.
What is the notice requirement? How many days is it?
It's to put in the paper,
Yeah.
we have to put it 5 days before the meeting.
And then the surrounding owners, is there
Yeah,
a,
the surrounding owners, at least 7 days. We asked for them to send it out 14 days in advance in
Okay.
case somebody's on vacation or
okay,
something.
gotcha. All right.
So,
So I'll get with Everett tomorrow, and then
Okay.
we'll get this.
So we had some questions, though, before the corner lot
Okay.
issue came up that I think have not been answered,
Okay.
that relate to what Terrence found about the
yes.
back line that was not clear on the maps.
And the well, and,
Front there that looks like it's got 3 stories.
oh yeah,
because they put
and
a
that's
door.
actually, thank you, because that's what I was having the conversation with you when your light bulb went off in your head, like, hey, wait, it could be this, and it could be that, it could be the other thing. Is what we were concerned about in the original plans,
Just so the applicant knows,
yes.
we need these
And
questions
so,
answered to
and
go forward.
that, I got my package here. It shows the front elevation, which we would assume would be towards the lake, and it's got French doors. But there's not a porch, and there's a basement. There's a whole extra level there.
Okay.
I don't think that's the latest one. The latest one had the land coming down with a basement door.
That's the back, okay. So
Oh, that's the back, I'm
I'm, okay, I said that backwards. So this,
Yeah, on the left there at the bottom.
this they're saying is the rear elevation, but this would have to be towards the lake, which we would, again, assume would be the front elevation, because otherwise, the way they had it, like, the kitchen was here and there's a bathroom, like, why would you have the bathroom looking towards the lake? Like, the way the plan was laid out. And again, they have this door here. We just needed clarification on which side was which of the buildings, because
Okay.
it wasn't making sense for
so
us.
this one's to the lake, east, looking east.
Okay, well, if
This is
that's,
south, this is west, and the other side
Because
is
the
north.
basement is presumably from the drawings just for, equipment and heater and
Right.
whatever. It's not meant to be a living space necessarily, but
And then
see
the
this
other
thing
thing
here, this
was,
odd thing where now all of a sudden the land comes down and there's a door exiting from the basement.
Okay.
and on the site plan, they haven't reduced the house size to 600 square feet. It's right here, it's still showing 800 square feet. You want to show that to Mike? Sure. And then, the annotation for the well is not correct when the board was out there. And,
The annotations for the well, you said?
yeah, that's what Allison said. They marked it off, and that, they didn't feel that was correct.
And then we had a question here about where the driveway, oh, I know.
Right, where's the driveway?
The
front or
road,
rear?
where does the road start? There is a road that's sort of obvious, but then there appears to be a lot of roadside land here, and it's not clear. Is that part of this drawing? Is it actually this dotted line? Is it?
Okay, so what is the edge of the property?
here, Helen, here's, I have some pictures.
So
that-
this is the edge of the property. It's right
I
here.
don't mean to keep burdening you, Michael, but is Mountain View Road a public road or a private road? Private road. Is there any significance to that as far as we're concerned?
No, not really.
Okay.
So then, if this is the edge of the property, can a driveway presume to
Yeah. Yeah, so,
To cover what is this land here before the road? What is all this?
well, presumably it's all,
Common land?
yeah, it's just owned by whoever owns the road.
The homeowners association.
So it's not a public road?
Right.
So, oh, here's the drawing. But yeah, he just like hand wrote it.
I'm not sure why she gave you this. Oh, here's the front of
This
it.
should be,
Okay.
say, 600? It doesn't, because the board said they had to reduce the square footage of the house.
Joanne, you better come show us what you want him looking at on this. So this is the front of the lot?
Yeah, that's
Oh, that Margot gave back, so the
Because there was a
determination
house
was,
there. This isn't the front of the lot.
Terrence
Oh, I see,
thought
that's
that
the
what
driveway.
they're gonna need
92
is a
is not
rear
back.
lot,
Rear line,
variance.
okay.
And that
Longer corner
that
lot.
they meet the front yard variance.
Okay.
And I believe that we met, the side yards were fine, so I think this is just gonna do
No,
the rear
these
yard.
weren't fine until they said they'd reduce it. And then they
Right.
didn't reduce it on the drawing.
Right,
So we're not
exactly.
clear what they've done.
Okay,
So I'm sorry, here's the land right here. This is the driveway
okay.
of the house.
That's the
next-
driveway next door, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's right here. And see, that's the house.
Yeah.
And in fact, the driveway comes
partially-
over this side
Oh,
of the
wow,
lane.
okay, yeah, it encroaches.
But if they're no longer if they're gonna use this as a driveway, then does the board have to be specific that this should be removed?
No, I mean, I don't think we, for purposes of his area variance, we're, you know, all right, are we alerted to the fact that the driveway crosses the boundary line? It does. But that's his title issue with his neighbor. It isn't necessarily our issue
Okay.
with him. You know, is there a preference for the driveways to be on their own property? I mean, if I was the owner, I'd want them to either move the driveway or have a license agreement that says, I'm giving you permission to use it. You know, Everett may, you know, have some concern about whether or not it's actually a zoning violation, but your driveways can be, there's no setback for the driveway. At least I don't think that there is. So it can be on the property line, and that being the case, then it isn't like, you know, a structure crossing or in a setback. So
We don't have a setback for driveways?
I don't think we do.
So then I believe a later drawing did mean that the side yard was acceptable, but they didn't recreate the drawing. They didn't update the drawing to show
And I
that.
think we were concerned about the well.
So yeah, let me understand the
Now,
well.
where's the well? I'm not even sure I know.
Okay.
Because this is their septic plan down here. So it's got to be back here somewhere.
Yeah.
When it comes in front of Everett for a building permit.
No, I understand that's like pre-existing non-conforming, but like, because I just know.
And in fact,
At work,
I
people ask for
I
Oh.
don't know what this
Hang
break
on.
is there.
I don't think, there's not gonna be a well.
Oh, that's right, it's
There's a
town
water line,
water.
yeah.
It's,
Yeah, there's the water line right
yeah.
here.
So guys, there is no well. Margot, there is no well because the property is hooked up to
water.
the water district.
Well,
So
will
then
be.
that old well that's
Yeah.
there is probably abandoned. The well that is showing on this map is probably abandoned.
She's pointing to something down here.
The WV?
WV, right here. So what does that mean? WV, I mean,
I thought it was the well.
But yeah, no, that's the whole point of this, is that they have water now.
All right,
Well,
so
then-
we'll have a question for Everett as to whether, whose well that is.
Yeah.
And whether it was abandoned.
All right, so
just wanna
you're
borrow
gonna go
this to
back and
show. Yeah, no.
you're gonna redo the letter and give it to us, and so then we'll know what variances are needed, and then you'll communicate with that
what
with
may
Bill
be the
Schilling.
well,
Yes.
And
abandoned
then
well, but
they'll
apparently.
see if they wanna go
their
from
hookup
there.
will be
Yep.
up here. And here's the septic down here, but it's so funny that that little dot is something that I didn't even know existed.
And that, we're not, obviously because of these discrepancies in the code, this is not like a new application. We're just going to
Yeah,
rehear this?
I would like us to do that. I think
Yeah,
that's
I think-
equitable.
Right, I do too.
Good.
Well,
Well, it's where we were when
Right.
Margot had sent those questions that didn't get answered because this other possibility came up, calling it a corner lot. So we could just go back, because didn't we just, what's it called? Hold it off for 3 months possibly.
Adjournment.
As needed, yeah. Adjourn it.
Thought someone else forgets words too.
But legally, that adjournment motion, because they asked for withdrawal, doesn't come into play.
Yeah, I don't know if we really have to concern ourselves with that.
Okay,
It's not
that's
that big a
fine.
deal, you know?
Okay.
The more
So
important
what-
thing is,
Could we, because we gave them the letter with that, different thought, I guess you would say, and now we're rescinding that, is there any legal issue?
no, so
We
in the
have-
wisdom of the state legislature,
Okay,
there's no estoppel against the municipality, which means, there's no estoppel against the municipality
Okay,
to.
what's the stop
I'll get to it.
okay, thank you.
In the enforcement of a zoning code.
Okay.
Which means that we can't be stopped from enforcing our code. And we don't
Even if it
incur.
was overlooked, it was just overlooked, basically.
Yeah, I mean, we don't incur liability unless we have an intentional act.
Okay,
If we make a mistake, we make a mistake, and
Okay.
sometimes we have the ability to correct it before it's too late.
we
But
just
this
get to
is,
learn from this one.
yeah, this is one of them, you know? So we have some lost time, but that's about, the applicant has lost time.
We took many training courses in this last couple of weeks. We've learned a lot.
Yeah. But no, we don't have to worry about liability. If we did, then it would be a whole other ballgame, but that's one of the
I think that's
actual.
great. I think it's great that we can be like, oh, wait, we can look at and have the time without the threat of, it
Yeah.
biting us, I guess you'd say.
Yeah.
You've heard the expression, you can't sue City Hall.
Oh, no, I had not heard that
Never
one.
heard that? Jesus, am
No.
I really dating myself? Am I the only one that knows that
No, I
expression?
know it, I know.
I know.
No,
Ellen
I just haven't helped,
Jesus.
I haven't handled
really-
But I
lawyers
didn't
a lot.
understand it, John. I've heard it, but I wouldn't have understood it in this framework.
understand it.
Yeah.
A banker told me one time, he who has the gold makes the rules.
Yes,
I think that's the motto of Goldman Sachs, isn't it?
Think so.
that's funny. Well, we have Mike captive. Is there any other questions we want to ask him?
Yeah, this is totally kind of semi-related to this, is my understanding of the law. Looking at the character of the neighborhood is a deviation of, because, one of the issues is that there are a number of lots that are the same size as this. But my understanding is that the size of the lot is not the only factor. You can look at other factors as to whether it fits.
Yeah.
Because one of the issues with this property is, because there was a empty lot in the middle, the lot on the right has the house built right up on the edge of the left side of the thing, and then the other side, the lot on the other side has the house built right up as well. So it's not like you have 5 lots with houses in the middle, and this is gonna fit right in.
Yeah,
You have
yeah.
2 houses right on the lot line, and then this house is gonna be squashed in between.
Yeah.
I mean, you haven't seen the lot, it's
No.
remarkably tiny.
Yeah, look, my first house was on a 5,000 square foot lot. So, I had 8 feet on one side and 3 feet on the other, and it worked. I could afford it, and that's kind of what it was. But when you're looking at the character of the neighborhood, obviously you have the test that is, part of what we're looking at is the benefit to the landowner going to outweigh the detriment to the health, safety, and welfare of the community. And that's a really important term, because it's not, the health, safety, and welfare of the 2 neighbors on the side of you are going to be impacted by a variance. It's the whole community, because you have to zoom out and take a look. And these are, very hotly debated around lakes all over the place. Peach Lake in particular, where all of the houses that front on the lake are now getting torn down and rebuilt with, you know, larger houses. And so you have mergers of lots, and then 3-story, you know, the tallest house you could put that's blocking everybody's view. And some of them are getting done by owners buying, accumulating parcels and then building a big house. Don't need variances, but they're changing the character of what is around the lake. So to me, if I was looking at, you know, the character of this thing, and I can appreciate, you know, what houses are built where, and, you know, understanding what the bulk setback was at the time, which in the 1900s was probably nothing, you know.
You stuck your carriage next to the front door.
Yeah, right, exactly. But I think the things I'd be looking at are, you know, yeah, certainly it's going to be a tight fit. But is it a story taller than everybody else? Is it, you know, what is the characteristic that makes it stick out? Or is it just another house that's close to 2 other houses? You know, from a layman's term, I think those are the things that I'd be interested in looking at is, you know, is the peak of the roof taller than everybody else?
Yeah.
You know, those are the things that get,
Yeah.
you know, that stick out, unless you're the furthest from the lake.
Well, I think
You know.
that's something we've actually brought up already, even without now the redraw with a full door for the basement,
Basement,
which
yeah.
looks now like a 3-story building.
Right.
Now, because I had heard from a neighbor on Mountain View on the road behind, that, you know, her grandfather, you know, went back, but they left that parcel vacant so people could access the lake. Now, is there any, you know,
There's no public right across that property.
okay, but not that it's that, but that's why it was never built on.
Yeah, but that's like conjecture.
Okay, well, that's what I'm asking. There's not, doesn't hold any weight.
No.
So, I don't know, I just, as a property owner, if I had something behind, you know, the house behind, and then all of a sudden, like you said, here's a 3-story going in front of you, it's kind of
Yeah.
disheartening.
Yeah. No,
I thought there was, I mean, you just referred to it, if someone's used to using, what's it called when they're using something on your land or have access, and it goes on for a certain period of time.
So there are ways to acquire rights via adverse possession, but there's a test that goes along with it, and part of that test is the use has to be open and notorious and under a claim of right. And that means that it has to be, the most obvious way to exhibit a claim of right is to put a fence around it and keep people out. So that's a,
I love that word, it has to be notorious.
yeah. But that's the way that you would acquire rights by adverse possession. But no one has land rights or view shed rights unless they're laid out. You just
You can
don't.
get easements.
You can get easements, yeah.
I have no idea how can an easement only be formed by agreement, or can you acquire an easement through use?
I believe you can acquire an easement through use. But again, it's going to be very similar to the adverse possession test. It's, you know, it's going to be the identical test. Because you're not going to, if it's an easement, you're not going to claim ownership to it, and, you know, like fee title ownership, but certainly use.
But this hasn't come up.
You just think like the Shore Haven Owner Association would have purchased this versus, you know.
Yeah.
Well, they purchased that other lot and then sold it off, so.
Sure. Once it becomes valuable, and then everybody can contribute less, you know, by selling it.
Yeah.
All right, are we, any other questions? Are
I'm
we?
good.
Yeah, this is so helpful, thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
We're going into
I wish I
such
saw that
detail.
provision sooner. We wouldn't have this conversation.
Yeah, it was a learning experience.
Yeah, no, it definitely was.
All right, good. All right, I guess, any new business to discuss? We don't have anything for May?
So, I guess we can reach out to Mr. Schilling with the goal to have him on our June agenda?
Yeah, so I'll call Bill, I'll let him know what the plan is, and I'm good at giving bad news.
Thank you.
And then I'll just let him know that you know, we're not going to require a new application, but you'll get a new letter from Everett, and we'll proceed accordingly, and he'll have to coordinate with you for purposes of notices.
Updated maps.
Yes, that's right, the updated drawings, yeah. Yeah, I listed the four
Just
things.
the rear lot. It looks like we just need an area variance for the rear lot.
Okay,
And well, and the drawing to be updated to
Right.
reflect that they reduced the size of it.
Right.
They can't do it in May, we can't accommodate them in May.
Well, I think May Allison's away.
Oh, right, we can't
That
do
was
it
the-
at the
So
It
usual
was, we
time
were
at the
gonna
end.
wind up having to switch the date anyway
To be
because
too
of,
early.
Right.
for board members.
Okay,
So, we might as well just shoot for June.
what is the June, what day of the month is it in June?
Usually it's the fourth Monday, unless we wanna go for the second Monday.
I'm
I mean,
fine.
but then we would need to know everybody could attend.
It's scheduled for the 23rd of June.
that's the fourth Monday, the 23rd.
And
14th is the site visit if we need to.
I was gonna say, that's the
It's a
best-
movable feast.
That's the best reason not to have a new thing for this thing, that we don't have to do another site visit.
I hope everybody's going to the movable feast, though.
is that a Monday?
It's the Aiken Hall June 14th, it's a Saturday. It's a
Oh.
fundraiser
Oh,
for June 14th for the Aiken Hall Association. They have the annual or biannual movable feast.
Oh, okay, you
So
know, my
is-
granddaughter's
is,
graduating high school. Yeah.
Is your meetings regularly Mondays?
yeah,
Okay,
the
so
23rd is a Monday.
right,
Yeah.
right. Is it at all possible to try to do it sooner?
Yeah, if the board can, because the first and third Monday are planning board meetings, the second Monday we could do a ZBA meeting if, we have a quorum.
Yes.
What's that
I'm good.
date?
It's the 9th.
June 9th, so we need to see if we can get
Right.
enough people.
The only thing I have on my agenda for that day is to ask Rich about a grant.
John, do you, and Helen?
I'm gonna say yes until I get home and check, but I would think I can.
can't see that I would have anything on that day.
All right, now send an email
I
to
don't make
Allison
my own
and,
schedule.
I was having a conversation today with an attorney who is trying to not take clients, so he keeps raising his rates. And and I'm like, oh, you're at the self-sabotage portion of your law practice, you know. But he can't seem to raise them high enough for people to stop having disputes.
Man, that's a good problem to have.
Yeah, yeah. It's kind of a funny conversation. It's like, I should try that.
Well, people probably think you're really good if your rates are going up.
Yeah, but it's a scam.
Yeah.
That's fine. All right, motion to adjourn?
I'll
Ellen?
make a motion.
Seconded by John?
Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. My best friend was attorney, and her grandmother said to her, "Good thing you're an attorney,
turn
because
the-
you got a lot to
And I'll
say."
get you the minutes.
Okay.
I promise, I didn't realize there were so many pages. I thought I'd
know,
done.
and then there was
Attorneys
two
is-
sets.
I always
Yeah.
tell people,
Oh, that's two sets.
every
That's why.
litigator,
Okay.
no matter how much he seems like a nice guy, every litigator has a nasty streak, or he wouldn't be a litigator.